All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining our session, and I'm really excited to present today with Brent. And Brent, why don't you get us started?
All right. So I'm Brent Hickman. I'm currently a enterprise agile coach at Invesco. Was working downtown until the pandemic hit us. So like many of you guys, I am working from home. I have been an agilist for a little over 10 years, and I got my start as in uh, a small 300 employee company, basically piloting an agile program, and and I drank the Kool-Aid when one of my first customers, when we delivered the final product, exclaimed, "That's exactly what I needed. It's not what I asked for, but it's what I needed." And it's like you guys were in my head. And that experience was so much different. Being giving her something that delighted her versus being frustrated by the process along the way. So since then, I jumped in as a scrum master, filled in for a year or two of that, and jumped over as a product owner. Um, Moved over to a program manager, managing $4 million, $12 million programs, and finally decided, you know what, I want to help other people along the way, truly understand what it means to be agile, and helping entire organizations now is it's what I love to do. All right, Jeremy.
Cool. Thank you, Brent. And I'm Jeremy Pullen. I'm a software director at Vestman Networks. I'm also a board member at Plotus, and I've been in different leadership roles in the Agile space since 2003 at a number of companies. And along the way, I've made a lot of mistakes and realized that leadership was one of the key things that they don't teach you, and that you really have to learn. And it's not a destination; it's a journey. So I do like to do a lot of stuff with my family and kids, backpacking, and I also collect cameras and other old stuff. As you can see in my background, I've got some stuff back there. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start out with a case study based on REI's reaction to the COVID-19 crisis, and we designed this talk before all this happened, but then we went and reworked it to take that case study, and then we're going to talk about how that relates to how our brains work, tying in Daniel Kahneman's work with thinking fast and slow. We'll tie that then into some techniques for how to communicate in a way that is compassionate, nonviolent, from Marshall Rosenberg, and then tie that then into the SCARF model from David Rock as a way to really, make sense and apply this practically. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. Brent?
All right. So back in April, Eric Arts is the president and CEO of REI Corp, or the co-op, found himself in a unique situation of having to balance the almost many times conflicting needs of his employees, the health and well-being, the needs of his customers, shareholders, as well as his own needs. And many times, strategies that he would choose to balance those conflicting interests would cause a threat for one of the areas or reward the others. So let's take a look at first at what are some of the challenges he had. And so back in April, as we all know, the pandemic hit. And looking at his employees, he had to provide for the safety and well-being of his employees, as well as the economic well-being of the co-op. So he made a few decisions. One was to close all 162 locations, starting immediately in beginning of April. During that time, he was going to continue paying all retail employees for about a week and a half through April 14th and maintain their benefits. As well as after April 14th, he was going to begin unpaid 90-day furlough for all retail field employees, continue their health and welfare benefits, and prepay their portion of the benefit premiums. So that enabled the employees to apply for unemployment insurance. In addition, they were looking to begin curbside pickup within the next 45 days for their customers. And on the leadership side, he agreed to forfeit his 100% of his salary for the next 6 months, as well as his incentives for all of 2020. And leadership was going to reduce their pay by 20% and all incentives by 2020. So we can see in each one of these decisions, there are some negative impacts to some of the constituents and positive impacts to others, right? So closing locations, right? Negative impacts, the customers would not be able to come in and shop. However, it balances the safety of the employees. Extending benefits, right? That's an additional cost to the co-op, which is a negative impact to the shareholders. However, positive impact, right? It allows the employees, while they're no longer working, to continue receiving benefits. As you can see on each one of these decisions that he made, he had to balance negative impacts versus positive impacts. So as we go forward, we're going to look at some of the strategies that leaders can use to decide how to increase the positive impacts while reducing some of the negative impacts in their strategy. All right, Jeremy.
So a key element here is really this idea of needing to not just look at the cut and dry part of things of dealing and working with others, but really understanding what emotions are going on and acknowledging them and dealing with them intentionally. And this quote from Daniel Goleman really highlights that. So if we can't marshal our emotions, then we can't lead effectively. So let's talk about system 1 and 2. This is from Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. It really begins with some kind of stressful situation that triggers an automatic response. It also often triggers some kind of bias that we have. And what that causes us to do is immediately go into self-protection mode that causes us to be blind to other people's needs. And that's a natural thing to happen. What then happens as a result is we go into this self-righteous blame and conflict mode that just then reinforces that situation, often causes us to respond in a way that continues this cycle and it keeps going. So what we want to realize is that all of us respond differently to threats versus rewards. When there's a big threat, we respond much quicker and much, I believe it's 4 to 6 times of a much stronger response than when there's an equivalent reward. And so that's just how we're wired. And that's how a company's employees are wired, every individual. So leaders need to be aware that not only are they responding this way, but everyone else in the company is as well. And they have to be intentional about then overcompensating on the reward side to make sure that that everyone isn't in this threat response loop. So one of the key characteristics of leadership is this willingness to confront anxiety and then to be intentional about about taking anxiety um, and and working and helping others to combat it. So this is a very difficult thing. This is we're not telling you how to make this easy, but what we are going to talk about is tools to, as a leader, work through your own anxiety as well as others. So going back to this picture, what we really want to be able to do is we can't get rid of this loop. The stressful situation is there, and there's nothing you can necessarily do to eliminate that stress. But what you can do is you can uh, interrupt it through healthy stress mechanisms. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is how do we overlay this negative loop with positive actions that can introduce healthy stress into this environment, and then can, as leaders, we can interrupt and counteract the negative loop with a positive one. So let's talk now about the first part, nonviolent communication, and this gives us a model for how people deal with stress, and it really focuses on unmet needs versus met needs. And so the idea is that when someone has negative emotion, it comes from, or if they have emotion at all, it comes from a need that's either being met or not met. And if you have needs that aren't being met, then you're going to respond with some kind of emotions that gives us a clue about what might be going on. And then our strategy, um, um, our goal, I mean, is to come up with a way to increase the met needs, apologize, and to somehow counteract and reduce the unmet needs through a set of strategies. Now, what's interesting is our strategies are often the concrete things that we do. The problem with that is they don't always work. Just as in the keynote previous to this, the story that Doc Norton told about doing the game night at their house, and they had a strategy, and that strategy ultimately only partially worked, but the need was met, through folks playing other games than they had originally planned. So the key here is if we become attached to the strategy, then we lose sight of the outcome that we're trying to accomplish, the healthy stress we're trying to move towards, and then we get attached to the strategy itself. So um, we end up, when we focus on the strategy itself, we create emotional resistance and fallout. Whereas if we become emotionally aware of the actual outcome and needs we're trying to meet, then our strategies can be flexible to focus on how to meet the needs. And the two key mechanisms there are making requests or demands. A request is something that people have an option to do. A demand is something that they don't have an option to do. So focusing on requests that can create healthy stress. So one of the key ways to accomplish that is then to really understand a language for people's needs. And there are lots of different needs models. You may have heard of autonomy, mastery, and purpose from Daniel Pink. David Rock has this idea of SCARF. So that's this acronym: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So we're going to go through this a few times and you'll come back to this. So it comes down to, in your personal life, there may be a different needs model you might want to go to. So with your kids, your wife, or spouse or other family members. But in the workplace, these are some of the key needs that people really are dealing with. That includes status. How do you compare in some kind of pecking order to others, organizationally. So who's listened to and who isn't, who's promoted, who isn't. Certainties, the ability to know what's coming next and know when things are going to change. Autonomy is this ability to live life on your own terms and make decisions without having to ask for permission. Relatedness is really being aligned around goals. Are we working towards the same thing or different things? And then fairness, are you working late while other people are going home early? Or is everyone pulling their weight in some fair way? And there are really two things here. One is everyone has a weight that they apply to these. So some people care more about autonomy than they do status. So everybody has a weight that they apply, and then they have how much that need is met. So it's the importance of the need, and then how much that need is actually being satisfied, in a certain situation.
So if we look back at the use case, any decision that Eric Arts decided on is either going to trigger a threat or a reward. And as Jeremy showed earlier, anything that is triggered as a threat has immediate and a strong negative response. And so each of these decisions had a conflict based on which category it fell under, whether it's the employees, the shareholders, the customers, or the managers. So if we look at each one of these, we can begin to put on the SCARF model based on each of the decisions he made. So let's take a look at each one of these. In the first one, he extended the benefits of the employees. Well, who does that reward? If the rewards, it provides a status, or it raises them up, certainty. The employees know that they're going to be able to receive benefits for a certain period of time. If they get sick, they need to go to the doctor. And certainly a level of fairness for each one of them. However, the increased expense has a negative impact on shareholders, right? And so it reduces certainty of the organization. The company or the co-op is no longer earning money while they're paying out benefits. And autonomy. Well, the shareholders didn't have a say in extending the benefits. So they don't have the autonomy of that decision. So I'd like to go through a couple more of these and maybe open it up to the chat. I don't think we can open up to, I'll let people speak here. But if we look through each of these decisions, let's take a look at, for the SCARF model, what are the threats and what are the rewards? So if we reopen curbside in 45 days, how is that a threat to employee? That threat to employee means that they may be exposed to COVID. And so we can see that was, it gave them some certainty, right? Well, certainty, they may have contract COVID. Fairness, they don't have a decision in there. However, it's also a reward. Certainty, they receive payments while they're working the curbside. Status, they have a job. Autonomy, they can choose to do it or sit out. And relatedness, we're all in this together, keeping the co-op moving forward. We're helping the customers. If we look at unpaid furlough, For employees, well, now they can apply for unemployment benefits. So it gives them some status, the certainty they continue uh, to receive benefits. They also receive some form of um, of income and fairness. You know, they don't have to worry about uh, contracting COVID. If you flip side on the shareholders, though, the reward for shareholders is it was no longer paying out while the company is making not making money. And in fairness for them, shareholders know that uh, that they will continue to earn some kind of benefit going forward. Similar to closing locations, for a threat to employees means autonomy. You know, they had no decision in that whether they can work or not, and the certainty of are they going to have a job going forward. Again, another conflict with the same category employees. Um, so certainty. I don't have to worry about contracting COVID. Um, the fairness, closing location. You know, again, it's the CEO, the president and CEO is looking out for our well-being over the benefit of the organization. So the CEO needs to compare and contrast the threats and rewards for each decision that he makes going forward. And what are those things? How can we balance that out to minimize the threats while maximizing the rewards? Um, so if we looked at it from the perspective of the shareholders and the well-being of the organization without the well-being of the employees, right? We can close the locations that doesn't benefit the customers. They can no longer do any shopping. It doesn't benefit the employees if we don't extend benefits, but it minimizes the impact to the shareholders, right? So again, you know, that strategy that Eric Arts had to come up with had to consider every each of those categories and look to maximize the rewards for each, minimizing the threats. We can do that by using the SCARF model in order to reach that balance. Right. So if we look at the key takeaways, we need to look at, as a leader, how can we take that unhealthy stress we have, in this case, that pandemic that is called wreaking havoc on REI, and come up with strategies that convert it to healthy stress? How do we balance the conflicting needs for those people that we, in categories of people, how do we balance the conflicting needs? How do we take threats and balance them over to rewards? We want to overcompensate threats to maximize the rewards. And when we look at our goals, we want, in our strategies, we want to be flexible as we receive information. We get that feedback loop to make sure that we're balancing those threats and rewards and the outcomes of our strategies. Right, we've got to be able to adapt those strategies based on the feedback that we're getting to continue to maximize the rewards going forward. All right.
Thank you, Brent.
Yep.
And we had a few questions already, and let's open up for some discussion and questions. One of them is from Lee. I found it a bit confusing where the letters in the thread are supposed to be bad or good. And so let's go back to that. the letters aren't bad or good. It's, is there a threat to someone's status or certainty, or is there a reward to their status or certainty? And so what we're trying to do is understand what is the balance of threat and reward that folks are dealing with, and by by being aware of and understanding where some stakeholders are threatened and where some stakeholders are rewarded, we can see whether we're really meeting all of the needs of everyone in a balanced way.
So it looks like he went on to say, are some letters more impactful and weighted more than others? And I think in this situation, it depends on the individual themselves. So the fairness of the CEO versus the employees. The CEO in this case, he reduced, or he cut his salary for 6 months while he furloughed the employees for 90 days. Well, in the fairness of that, right, had he not done anything for himself, that would have been unfair in the eyes of the employees. But what's the weight for each one of those? The the weight of employees not receiving the income could be far greater than a CEO that maybe has a lot of income saved up, a lot of investment vehicles they can pull from to weather that period, while the employees, right, may be going day to day. So the relatedness in that and the fairness versus the uncertainty, it depends on the situation that you're coming from.
So yeah, there's absolutely a weighting to it, and we can't always determine that scientifically, but we can use this as a lens to understand where different folks are coming from, and how this relates to agile transformation is many transformations go in completely blind to the needs of the different stakeholders and try to just go do some kind of process change that completely ignores different stakeholder groups and what their needs are.
Yeah, I've seen that lately just internally in my own work I've been doing in my company. And one thing that I think can be dangerous is if there isn't someone adding a more accurate perspective or lens, because what a executive leadership might think is fair to an employee might not be what the employee perceives as fair, like you said. So is it, how do you, where is there, does this model rely on someone there as an arbitrator or a neutral party to say this falls within that fairness, this falls within certainty, that sort of thing, to try to keep things consistent?
So
So
I
the
think in
model
this
doesn't
case,
rely on an arbitrator, but that may be a strategy to go balance out how different needs are being met.
yeah, and I think the onus is on the leader in this case, Eric Arts, to be open and receptive to feedback. Talk to individuals from the co-op, talk to his employees, and receive that feedback and be willing to change that strategy based on the information he's getting back. And then it goes back to, I think somebody asked, could the status be a threat on reopening curbside? From an employee perspective, one, you now have the potential to be exposed to contracting COVID from somebody picking up an item. However, you could look at it as, hey, I'm all in it for the co-op. I want to make sure that I'm providing the benefits to the customers and the co-op to continue this going on. I'm willing to make that risk of contracting COVID in the interest of the others. You can have another employee that says, you know what, I'm here just for a job. I really don't care. I just want to be safe. And how they perceive that status and certainty could be different for both of those. I think somebody lost Can't
Yeah,
hear us?
everybody can hear us. It's just Charles. Okay.
Okay.
Great question. So, other things that you guys would like to discuss. What stood out in this for you?
And everyone does have the ability to unmute themselves if you'd like to chat live.
So, quick question. As you're going through and looking at the SCARF model, what data points should you be bringing in? As a leader, do you just go off and you do your own assessment, or do you look at engaging with employees to do surveys or things like that to make sure you have a full picture of it?
So going backwards to this picture, what we're really looking for is what are the ways that we can read folks' emotions, and there may be different strategies for even understanding what their emotions are, but then link that back into an understanding of their needs, and then responding with requests or demands, primarily focused on requests that are going to shift the balance in some way. And so in terms of specific techniques that may be specific to your organization, but in all your conversations, you're listening for emotion, and then you're translating that emotion down into what is that unmet need that you're trying to, that may be unspoken, and most people don't know how to articulate their actual need, but they know they've got an emotion about something. So that's up to the leader to really drill down to the layer underneath that emotion to get to the need that isn't being met. And then it's up to the leaders to find the balance.
Yeah. An example at my organization, Invesco, when the pandemic hit, they sent everybody working from home. And, with the first goal of protecting its employee, the stated second goal was to continue providing the best benefits and experience for the customers. Now, in deciding when to start having employees return back to the office, one, they're looking at the data within each of the cities that they have offices to say, is the instances of COVID contraction going down? But they're also bouncing, not just using the hard data, sending surveys out to the employees and asking them, what do they want? What are their needs? Specifically sent out a survey for employees that have kids that are in either going to school or having to stay at home, and asking them what their situation is. So, well, in this case, they have somewhat conflicting needs, our customers, as well as the well-being of the company. They have to balance that with the employees and their well-being. And, they could have gone with the decision of saying, what, we're going to use our authority and tell our staff when they need to come back to the office. Forget what they think, what their concerns are. And that would have been in their right to do that. However, they did want to, they wanted to take those considerations in hand and make sure that they were communicating early and often, through town halls, recorded sessions, through surveys. So that bidirectional feedback, that feedback loop is established, and the trust that the employees have gained with the leadership has been established. So it reduces that unhealthy stress in that situation, while balancing the needs of the customers and the employees, while increasing the healthy stress.
So Sanjay asked the question, do you often use this model in crisis situations? And what and how can this model help in current or future situations? So you may have heard of objectives and key results. You may have heard of outcome-focused experiments, or you may have experience as a product manager. Many times, as leaders, as product managers, as somebody in any kind of leadership role in a company, we end up communicating in terms of our strategy for solving the problem instead of the problem itself. And so as a result, we confuse the strategy with the outcome, and everyone thinks that they need to follow our strategy, even if it may not actually solve the problem. So this is really important if you're doing OKRs, if you're doing any of those, building any kind of product, to be able to distinguish the outcome from the strategy that you're using to accomplish it. So this framework gives you tools to really speak clearly, communicate clearly, and separate the what versus the how, and then engage everyone in the organization to go solve the problem versus doing it a specific way that may or may not solve it. And yeah, we do use this for crisis and non-crisis situations to really understand where folks are coming from. So when you hear, somebody's resisting change in a transformation situation, that is most likely because we're somehow being blind to an unmet need, and we need to go then delve into that, understand what's the real issue, instead of blaming the person that might be experiencing that stress. Great question. Keep it coming, guys. This is great.
Anybody think of a situation where either they were impacted and you didn't feel like the leadership considered your needs in the decision making or the strategy they set, or a situation where you specifically consider the impact to others and set that strategy? What was the outcome? Was the outcome better?
Well, hey, it's Lee. So for mine, my organization right now, they kind of lagged behind on remote work. They set up some remote work policy that I don't know who they talked to about it, but it was totally weird and cumbersome and clearly from the 90s. And I lead a team of developers and designers, and I'd already had them working remotely at the beginning when all this was hitting. So they had all these weird things, guidelines and things they want us to do as managers. I'm like, this is all BS. I'm just going to ignore it. I was ignoring this policy because it made no sense. And I've told my people above me that, this, and they're not enforcing it because it's a bunch of BS. It's just not workable. So I feel like we just went rogue. I went rogue as a manager, or who has the opportunity to do that, and told my team, let's do what we've been doing as a team to continue to be successful. Because they gave us something that just, without considering, like I said, our needs, our fairness, a lot of things. So
That's great.
yeah.
So there was a divide between the leadership above you and you as a leader for your staff, and
Right.
you can see the difference in the strategies between what your leadership decided and what you decided, and how that strategy, and considering their needs, the different outcomes that would have achieved.
Right. I think it would be very different. So again, it's that interesting to me, that the different things you weigh, because if I had done exactly what they said to do, it would have slowed down our work considerably. So we would not have been able to meet the needs of our customers or the other people in our company. And it would have caused some other headaches too. And it did not jive with how people actually, the reality of how people actually do business inside the company. So I think maybe it works for one group. I'm sure there were a couple groups that maybe accountants or other individuals who are always tied to their desk, and they couldn't imagine ever having to come home and do things. And I'm sure there were some legal and compliance things that had to be considered. But I feel like, yeah, you know, I don't think consideration was given, like you said, that they really thought through the impact of what this one policy was going to have on these different groups and their ability to sustain work and be safe and all those things.
Yeah.
And so, Lee, applying that to your situation, this both gives you a lens to understand the mindset of the people who may have created those policies, but
Yeah.
also a language to go back to them in a way and use SCARF, for instance, to then speak to them in a way that isn't prescriptive to how they need to fix it, but is clear about what needs their policies may not be meeting, so that then you have this common ground to go solve this in a way that may meet all of the different, you know, factors, including compliance and other things.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a good exercise for me to try and apply this, I think. So, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Well, we've got time for another couple of questions, but in the meantime, we'd love your feedback, and I'm sure there will be some surveys, but we'd love to get something live as well. So if you're willing, in the chat window, just post, you know, loved : you know, something that you loved about this talk, and also anything you think we could improve. Just type improve and then that as well. And we'd love to take that as a way to keep making this better and learn from what all of you took away from this. So thank you very much. And Sabrina, I think back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeremy and Brent. That was great. So logistics from here, we are at 10:45. And so we're running a little bit early here. So feel free to stick around and ask any other questions that may come up. These recordings will also be available within a week or so after the conference is over. But logistics for next time, Jeremy, if you want to stop presenting real quick, I'll show my screen. Thanks. Awesome. So the next round of sessions is here on my screen. So here in this Zoom room, we've got Ed coming up next. And then in the experience report room, we've got Kimberly and Jerry, and then Jam and Agile Jeopardy with Marguerite and Fundamentals. So those are the 11:10 sessions. I'll post a link to all of the different areas as well, so you guys can easily get back to that. And then in the meantime, again, if you guys have any questions, just let us know in here. Let me chat our links. All right. And of course, it's causing me problems. So I will get this up and running, but go ahead and pick your next session. And then there we go. So I just put it in the chat. So you should have access to all those different tracks and the passcodes for them. and we should be good. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to hang out and chat, we can stay on until 11.
Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Brent. This is Russell Miller. Thank you both for presenting today.
Hey, Russell.
Hey,
Thanks for the opportunity.
I just wanted to prove to the rest of the participants that they could actually use their microphones.
So, Russell, putting you on the spot, what was your key takeaway?
Oh, that's really good. Well, I had an advantage over the rest of the folks that my leadership scarf pump has been primed because I've had the chance to sniff around on these concepts just a little bit from hearing you speak a little bit earlier, Jeremy. So I'm intrigued to find out. I look in the chat here, and I see comments from Jason and comments from I don't think this is a first name, M. Kenyatta. So I think I'd rather hear from some of the newest the folks that the concepts might be completely new to them, Jeremy. Of course, I don't know how many of them are still here. They might have left to go to their next session.
Well, I just was trying.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just joking that that they may not be comfortable talking, but we're.
I think they certainly should be comfortable talking.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, I see Jason has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, talk a little bit about the strategy, the GTM strategy.
Yeah, I think that as we're our product is rather young, and we're looking at different go-to-market strategies, and this kind of gives us this framework kind of gives us a way to look at things a little bit different. Like, we talk about the impact, but actually putting it in this context and putting a framework in place where we make sure we touch on every piece of it, right?
Right.
But I think the one thing that I struggle with is, when you look at who you could impact, it seems like there could be like a laundry list of things that you could do an assessment on and run into, almost that analysis paralysis type approach, right? So thinking about really who are you really targeting with some of this stuff, and as I think about rolling this out and how I'm going to talk to my teams about it, it's a easing it into it and just working them through some exercises to understand that. So I think there's some value here, but there's a lot of information there, like, how do I make it successful? Because I just don't want to go in and roll it out and say, okay, guys, go, right? So what would be, your guys' recommendation for rolling this out to a new team who may be completely unfamiliar with it?
Is the team's a software development team?
Yeah, it's a software development team, QA developers, product managers.
So, I was just thinking, because you put on your question here the personas, and I've seen that a lot of times, that even in an agile environment where we're using user stories, and you put on there as a whatever I want, but do we truly understand who the customer is, even in that case? So many organizations skip over creating a persona so that we can empathize with that person, be able to identify and understand what their needs are. And with that separation, your development team really is, even though you're using the user story model, you're still blindly developing, new features without truly taking in consideration what the end user needs are. And so as I go through coaching, I always, highly encourage taking that extra step to develop out personas based on actual users of the people that will be using the new products.
Yeah, we actually do have a set of user personas, right? And I've been working with the teams on, as they're doing their user need statements, making sure they're focusing on the outcome, the so that statement more than they're focused on as I need to go do this, right? And
Right,
working towards
right.
that.
Yeah.
And because like a lot of times you'll see developers just going through and they're just building stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And moving away from that. So that's something I've been working on. And I think the SCARF allows the SCARF framework, you can apply it at so many different levels. So I think it'll be good, like starting off small, like getting the product management team to understand that and think through some of this stuff. Right. And is the SCARF model, do you know if it's part of the game storming suite of stuff at all? Are you guys familiar with game storming?
I've heard of it, but I'm not intimately
Okay.
familiar with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
So outside of you guys' presentation, you guys have any online material you recommend for someone who wanted to dig deeper into SCARF?
There's tons of stuff from David Rock on YouTube. NeuroLeadership Institute has a lot of stuff, as well as if you look at David Marquet's intent-based leadership courses, they're online and they're based on SCARF in large part. So those are a few key resources to go to.
Cool. Could you guys throw up that one of your first slides that had the list of the books out there that you were going to walk through? Because I got the Thinking Fast and Slow book written down, but I think there was a couple other books on there that I missed.
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
And David Rock it's a great video out on YouTube. If you look David Rock SCARF,
Okay.
that'll come up. There's an hour-long video. I'm trying to think of what the specific title of that too was, but about it gets really good about 10 minutes in, and then you probably cut out the last 10 minutes. But the other 40 minutes in that is just great material going through SCARF and how you can use that to understand the needs of individuals.
There
you go. There's the books.
Yeah, the nonviolent communication really interests me just because, from my DISC profile, I am a little bit of a D and come across a little aggressive, so that'd be a good read for me.
Yeah, it's useful for me as well because I'm in that boat. So here's the thing, whether it's a retrospective on a team or it's a user story, this gives you the language to emotionally engage the team and whoever you're dealing with on why it really matters, instead of just focusing on the cut and dry stuff. And so making that connection of why you should care really is a big part of engaging your teammates in really caring about what they're doing. And without that caring, then they're not going to bring their whole effort to it. But if they really do understand why it matters, then they're going to be much more invested.
Agreed. Yeah, and I didn't put this in the approved, but I think that's really good. I took that away as you guys were talking about it, but if you could put that maybe more in someone's face as part of this presentation about that emotional stuff, and maybe you have a specific example in there, I think it might help drive that story at home a little bit better. So I want to thank you guys. I want to go take a quick break for the next session. So thank you guys. Great job, and I look forward to hearing more from you guys.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.